Hi, I'm Ed Marison from Yeringberg, and today Cabernet Sauvignon is being harvested in the famous Yeringberg estate in the Yarra Valley, Victoria, Australia. This is responsible for one of Australia's most famous reds, the Yeringberg red, which is a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon with Malbec, Petit Verdot, Merlot and Cabernet Franc. It's also, of course, responsible, this grape, for some of the world's most famous and most sought after wines, so I thought it was worth having a look at how that all comes together. This beautiful region in its cool to moderate climate, best known for Burgundy varieties Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, is just one area in Australia growing world-class Cabernet. Coonawarra and Margaret River might be the first couple to trip off the tongue, but there are others besides. Head overseas and famous iterations can be found in the Napa Valley, California, Stellenbosch in South Africa, Hawke's Bay in New Zealand, Mendoza in Argentina, Alto Maipo in Chile, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And that iceberg was cut adrift, if you will, from ground zero, Bordeaux in southwest France. The wine we're discussing is a Bordeaux blend, essentially in the mould of the so-called left bank. This sector, to the west of the Gironde estuary, is where Cabernet Sauvignon reigns supreme, thanks to the presence of gravel soils that help it ripen. The cooler clay soils of the right bank are more Merlot's domain. But red Bordeaux is first and foremost a blend. Necessity is the mother of invention, as they say, and the need to accommodate Bordeaux's climate led to the creation of this much-copied mélange. Bordeaux has a moderate maritime climate, heavily influenced by the Atlantic Ocean. Among many things, this means it's susceptible to inclement weather in spring and early summer when flowering takes place. And though late summer into autumn is generally pleasant, there's no guarantee it will be warm or dry enough for a late ripening variety like Cabernet Sauvignon to get fully mature. To hedge against the low crop from disrupted flowering or unripe fruit from insufficient sun and warmth, wine growers planted a variety of grapes with different attributes, some budding, flowering and ripening earlier than others. This naturally gives a wider spectrum of aromas and flavours in the wine, as well as different structural elements, the texture and extent of the tannins, acidity levels, juiciness and weight. In Bordeaux, 5 varieties emerged as favourites for their suitability to grow high-quality wine in those soils and that climate: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot and Malbec. Cabernet Sauvignon is an aromatic, thick-skinned late ripener with small berries and strong flavour, high tannins and high acidity. That strength, structure and drive is what makes it the world's most planted wine grape. What it can lack, especially in cooler conditions, is a bit of flesh and stuffing. That's where Merlot might come in. This is an early budding, more red-fruited mid-ripener that reaches palatable maturity more readily than Cabernet, and its plump, thin-skinned berries tend to give fleshy, smooth-textured wines with lower acidity and softer tannins. Cabernet Franc, again, is an early budding, mid-ripener that has juicier berries and less tannin than its offspring, Cabernet Sauvignon. It's valued for its fresh acidity and raspberry, currant bush and pencil-led aromas. Though it only plays a cameo, Petit Verdot resembles Cabernet Sauvignon insofar as it's a thick-skinned, late ripener with plenty of tannin, deep colour and great acidity. It brings violet floral aromas, peppery spice and intense, inky fruit to the party. And a little goes a long way. And Argentina's beloved Malbec, just an extra in Bordeaux these days, is a vigorous, plump, juicy, mid-ripening grape that gives wines with deep colour, plenty of plummy fruit and relatively soft tannins. Of course, these are generalisations, and the exact impact of each variety will depend on factors such as vine age, the quality of vine material, the season, and of course, that thing we call terroir, a place's specific confluence of climate, soils, topography, exposure, etc. A chateau effectively designs its wine by the choice of varieties and the proportions in which they're planted, though vintage, i.e. which vines are able to deliver the goods in a given year, will have the final say. Many of the world's Bordeaux blends will operate with greater freedom. The producer might call upon whatever blending material it needs to hit the style, quality and price point it's aiming for. But the Yeringberg Red follows this Bordeaux chateau model, to an extreme degree in fact. The breakdown of the old vineyard plantings is just under 2/3 Cabernet Sauvignon, 13% Cabernet Franc, 11% Merlot, 7% Petit Verdot, and 5% Malbec. Fourth generation winemaker Sandra de Pury calls it the same wine from the same vines every year, meaning it comes from this single vineyard and effectively whatever fruit comes off the vine in shipshape condition ends up in the bottle. Yeringberg was founded in 1863 and it's been making this wine this way for more than 35 years. The slope faces northeast just above the Yarra River floodplains and is divided into an east and west section. In a move the French might find plain weird, and with results they'd find very hard to believe, Burgundy and Bordeaux varieties rub shoulders. Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are safely tucked away in the winery long before the Cabernet crew come in though. Still, 2024 has been a consistently warm and relatively early season, and that brings a few quirks of its own. As usual, Malbec and Merlot ripen first, but Petit Verdot, usually picked around the same time as Cabernet Sauvignon, comes in a little ahead of schedule. The tiny parcels of Malbec and Merlot, M&M as they're nicknamed, are picked together this year. They will ferment and mature together. The Petit Verdot, just 3 rows at the warmer foot of the slope, is harvested at the same time as the more precocious Cabernet Franc this year. They'll ferment together too. Cabernet Sauvignon, meanwhile, comes in a couple of weeks later. The grapes are harvested by hand, with a picking team summoned when Sandra and her brother, viticulturist Sandra de Pury, deem the fruit to be perfectly ripe. For Sandra, that means the skins and seeds are ripe and the flavours have everything. That last criterion is especially specific. It's easy to pick too early, she says. You need to know exactly how good your fruit flavours can get before you can judge when enough's enough. Picking by hand is a costly business, but it means the unsuitable fruit, grapes that have started to shrivel, say, which would impart overripe flavours to the wine, can be left on the vine or dropped on the ground. The bunches are collected in buckets small enough so the bunches at the bottom aren't prematurely crushed, which would open the door to oxidation of the juice. They're filled to a uniform height for ease of counting the crop and are immediately taken by tractor to the winery. The buckets are counted and weighed before being tipped onto the sorting table, where the next stage of quality control takes place. Anything under or overripe or in any way undesirable is weeded out before the bunches proceed to the crusher destemmer. The crusher releases the juice and the destemmer rips the stalks and the berries, so the skins and juice are left to proceed unencumbered. Sandra will conduct whole berry and whole bunch ferments as components for her Shiraz, for instance, but is happy that her mix of varieties here will give her all the fragrance, tannin and complexity she needs. In any case, it's rare to use whole bunches in Bordeaux blends where Cabernets Sauvignon and Franc are wont to impart attractive leafy characters without the stalky vegetal notes that the inclusion of their stems might invite. They go to a good home though. Out in the paddock, a herd of hungry cows are loving their vintage victuals. Samples are taken of the musts for analysis of their makeup, sugars, acids and so forth. Elsewhere, winemakers might opt to give the juice a cold soak or pre-fermentation maceration at this stage, a period of so-called aqueous extraction where some colour, tannin and aroma precursors are extracted from the skins. As opposed to the warmer alcoholic extraction that will occur during fermentation, this is a gentler process that may contribute another aromatic or textural dimension. In any case, this small winery doesn't have the space or facilities, and again, the interactions at play within these multi-varietal ferments will result in their own panoply of sensations. So, the skins and juice are run to the fermentation vats. All stainless steel here, but it could just as easily be wood, glass, ceramic, terracotta, plastic or concrete, and yeast soon gets on with the business of converting the grape sugars to alcohol. Co-fermentation is the norm in this adaptable small batch operation. After all, it's all going to end up in the same wine anyway. At another estate, it could well be standard practice to ferment and age the varieties separately, with blending trials at the end of the process to decide which components are needed in what quantities to achieve the desired wine. More on that later. Sandra opts to plunge her ferments, also known as pigeage or punching down, in order to give them air, dissipate heat, and extract flavour and tannins from the cap of skins that sits above the juice. This will be done 3 times a day when the ferment is at its peak, less frequently and more gently when things slow down, just to give it some air. Periodically, she will also check the progress of fermentation using a hydrometer, which measures the density of the must or wine, from which she can deduce how much fermentable sugar remains. The Merlot Malbec co-ferment is nearing its conclusion as the Petit Verdot Cab Franc kicks off. The Cabernet Sauvignon, on the other hand, will wait another 10 days before being harvested. When fermentation is complete, the wine will be constantly tasted to decide when it's time to press it off the skins. The ideal time will be when the wine is still super fresh, with the flavours all there, and the tannins nicely resolved and balanced with the wine. For Sandra's Pinot Noir, that might be just 7 days after the onset of fermentation. For the Bordeaux varieties, 3 to 4 weeks is the norm. This year, the Cabernet Sauvignon was picked on the 20th of March and pressed on the 11th of April, and that means Sandra presses it with the co-fermented Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc. She uses a sieve and hose to remove the finished wine from the skins and make it easier to bucket the skins into the press. The wine will be tasted at regular intervals through the press cycle, most importantly to determine at which point in the cycle the pressings are no longer desirable for our wine. The quantity and quality of the fruit means Sandra will include everything until that point where the press wine is about to feel and taste astringent. Again, there's no bitterness out here in the paddock where Sandra dishes up another delicious banquet to the grateful bovine masses. In a winery of this size, there's a fair bit of musical barrels that goes on to get the wines ready for their lengthy rest in the cellar. Once in place, it's time to fill the casks with the pressed wine. The Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon have spent 12 days settling together in tank. During that time, it underwent natural malolactic conversion. This process, common to pretty much all red winemaking, is where lactic acid bacteria convert the tartar, green apple-like malic acid into softer lactic acid. The wine will be pumped from the settling tank's racking tap. Here's the gunk that will come out of the tank's bottom tap. That gets left behind when our pristine press wine hits the barrel. In this case, all 228-litre French oak barriques. Throughout their time in the cellar, the barrels will also be regularly topped up, filled to the brim with wine kept in sealed stainless steel drums. This prevents acetobacter from feeding off the oxygen in the barrel headspace and turning our precious wine into vinegar. The wine will also be racked, moved from one barrel to another. This takes the wine off its sediment, which is then discarded and the barrels thoroughly cleaned. This clarification process also gives the wine air, essential for the formation of a red wine's pigmented tannins and promoting fresh, clean flavours and aromas. The 2024 Yeringberg Reds components will be racked twice in their first year in barrel and once more in the second. All up, these wines, the Malbec and Merlot portion, the Cabernet Sauvignon, Cab Franc and Petit Verdot lots, will spend 22 months in oak. Given the intensity of 2024's fruit, Sandra ends up using about 40% new oak, which is at the upper end for this wine. As well as imparting desirable complexity in terms of barrel spices, those cigar box and cedar type notes, this time in oak will also allow the wine to develop deeper, more layered flavours as interactions never cease between those myriad evolving compounds. It will also allow these flavours to integrate and for the textural elements, the tannins, to soften and assimilate seamlessly into the wine. At the end of the maturation process, many a Bordeaux blender will face options that Sandra doesn't have or need for this wine. Like Champagne, Bordeaux is a place where blending is key. We mentioned using different grape varieties to mitigate the effects of a marginal and relatively unstable climate, and how that gave the additional benefit of inherent complexity. Winemakers may also blend different vineyards with different site characteristics in locations that may experience different weather. That's not happening here. Same wine, same vines, every year, remember? Others may blend wines matured in a range of vessels, not just oak barriques, but maybe large and small vessels made from various materials. They may blend in some wine from other years. In most cases, including here in Australia, a bottle carrying a vintage on the label can contain up to 15% of wines from previous years. This may be a means of tweaking complexity, structure, weight, or volume. Again, this isn't happening here. At the end of a long process that began with bud break back in spring 2023, Sandra de Pury will bottle this 2024 Yeringberg Red in early 2026. It will then spend 8 months in bottle to ease into its new surroundings before we get to try it, if we're lucky. The de Pury family have been doing this for long enough for us to be pretty confident about the results. At this stage, it looks like it will be bottled without fining, with alcohol of around 13.5%, a little over medium body, brimming with red and black fruit, fresh red and black berries, currants and plums, framed by fine, polished tannins and flecked with well-integrated notes of oak spices. It should taste as detailed as this painstaking process has been, and as crisp, enchanting and invigorating as a clear Yarra Valley morning.